Alright, hey everyone, this is Bo. In this video we're going to be building a table that goes behind a sofa. Now where this table's got to go is the basement, and that adds some challenges because I can't glue up the entire base or structure and get it down there, so I have to design it and then build it in a way that can be assembled on site. It's 8.5 foot long, 34 inches tall, and 20 inches wide. The base will be made from maple, painted, and the top will be white ash stained. Here's a quick visual of what the table is going to look like, at least what I've envisioned here on the sketch. You can see a lot of diagonal braces in the corners, and that's just to help keep it from racking. It's going to be such a long table. Got to prevent the corners from opening up, especially since those are going to be built with some knockdown fasteners. So let's go ahead and get started, start milling some material, and I'll get going here. Alright, a lot of stuff going on the bench behind me here. I'll explain it in a minute. So first thing, I was cutting these little corner brace pieces for the table, and frankly I bought a used table saw, and after doing all the adjustments and alignments I just cannot get a clean cut to save my life. And so I've been cleaning up my cuts on either joiner or the planer, or in this case the oscillating spindle sander. And so that's what I was doing here with the little jig, is getting those nice and flush. I should say flat, not flush, flat. And then the other thing I've been doing is figuring out the joinery for the side assemblies. And they'll all have these little corner pieces in each of the corners. And I'm trying to figure out if I could use dominoes on both sides. So I tried that first. Can't do that, it's not possible. So I had to revert to using a domino just in one side, and then I'll use a screw and a plug that comes in from the very bottom or the very top, so it'll essentially be hidden after it's painted. And as well, I'm planning to use some of these knockdown fasteners, and I had to test them out. I've never used them before, so I wanted to test them out, how they went together, made sure I had the settings on the domino correct, and really just understand how strong of a joint they were. And I'm happy to report that they are very strong. They're actually pretty impressive. I didn't think they'd be so tight, but yeah, they do tighten these up really nicely. So that will work great for some of the brace pieces that go along the back section, and then bracing the long rails to the side assemblies. So now moving on to actually cutting the joinery in the side assemblies. and then we're going to get those glued up. So here we go. Well, the side assemblies are out the clamps. One thing you might notice is the diagonal supports are not installed. So I was going to glue them in place and then screw them in from the top and bottom. But those would be a real pain to paint around once they're in place. So I'm actually going to leave them out until I am done painting. And then I'm going to come back and install them permanently. I've turned my attention to laying out the mortise locations for all the stretchers that run side to side, and then as well some of the angled supports that are on the front and back of this unit as well. And I've probably spent the last better than an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes doing that. Not only their location, but since I'm using these knockdown fasteners, they have to be the mortises have to be specific depths and width settings. And so I'm trying to mark on the piece of wood what depth and width setting they have to be at, in hopes I don't screw this up down the road, which there's a likelihood that I might, but we're going to do our best. Hopefully I'll take my time and slow down and think before I make some mortises here. In order to help maybe be successful, I'm trying to break it up into different sections in the same setting. So I've got the front and rear top stretchers here. They need a bunch of mortises cut in between them, they need to be cut for stretchers that go in between them. And so I'm going to do all that first, since those don't have any knockdown fasteners. They're all the same depth setting and width setting. Just go through and do those first, get them out of the way. And then I'll turn my attention to the rest of them and hopefully work methodically here and not making too many mistakes. So yeah, here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. Start cutting some mortises. So a pretty big milestone here. I've got the base all dry assembled. Super happy with how rigid this turned out. I was worried about the length and the span of this. It was going to be kind of, I'm not going to say unstable, but just had a little bit of rack to it, but it's super solid. I'm happy with that. It's also relatively light, and so it's not too heavy. And visually it's not too heavy. I was worried about some of these extra details getting kind of, like I said, visually heavy, but it looks really good. Really happy with the way it looks and the way it turned out, except for one thing, and which was a kind of a known before I started, is that using these knockdown fasteners, you're not able to glue and pull things tight and kind of maybe clamp together small gaps. So where some of these knockdown fastener joints meet their adjoining pieces, there are some small gaps. Either they're one end of the miter is opened up a little bit, or there's a small gap either in the front or the back side. And so I had to figure out what to do with that. I take it back apart and refine each joint so they fit together nice and tight, or at least on that exterior surface they look nice and tight. Option two, since there is a chance that over time that gap may open back up, I could add a chamfer to the edge. I had just a piece around here. Here we go. Kind of add a chamfer to the very end of the piece. So when it goes together, it makes a shadow line. And so if there is a small gap in there, you can't really notice it. And so I have to play with that. My inner woodworker says to just refine the joint and make sure they go tight. My more pragmatic side says, well, it's going to take a lot of time to do that, and it might open up over time anyhow, or it may not go back together exactly the same way you have it in your shop. That's the one big concern I have, is I take this all apart, refine the joints, paint it, put it back together, there's still a gap there. Well, now what? Well, kind of back to option B, adding the chamfer to the ends, but like I said, I got to figure that one out. But next up, before I get to that, I need to sand all the joints as flush as I can. Got a lot of glue squeeze out on this top rail section, then some of the joints aren't perfectly squared up. Seemed like I had a little bit of either some fence drift on a couple of these, or just didn't place the domino in the correct spot. But I'll sand those flush, and then I'll work out the edge detail, and we'll go from there. So here we go, let's get sanding. So the base has been 80% disassembled. As I was disassembling, I did add a bunch of kind of depressed numbers into the ends here, so I know exactly where they go back together. Because I ended up going through and refining the fitment of all these pieces, where I had little gaps, I was able to use the belt sander and kind of adjust them a little bit. They are not perfect, but they are much better than they were before. I'm not going to add chamfer to the ends, and just leave them as they are. So moving forward, I still have to disassemble these small brace pieces in the corners here, but before I do that, I wanted to run my roundover bit through it just to get the kind of start and stop points for that roundover bit. And then I'll disassemble that and prep everything, prep the base for paint, and then I have to prep the top for stain. Pretty similar process, sanding. I won't water pop the base since I'll be painted, but I will water pop the top since that's going to get likely a water-based dye first, and then a stain over top of it. I'll talk about that more later. Two things I'm working on today. First, there needs to be a small drink rail that goes around the perimeter of the top. This table goes against the back of a couch, and so the client doesn't want any drinks or anything to kind of fall forward onto the couch. So I'm going to make a little rail out of some 6/4 material I have sitting in the corner here. I'm going to use that same 6/4 material to act as a mounting place for this USB outlet. That will be kind of on the same side as the couch, so that I'll plug in a laptop or a phone or whatever they have that. And that's just going to mount to one of the horizontal stretchers. That's just going to mount to the bottom side of that, and then it'll just have this mount to it. So here we go. I'm going to start by laying out the material on a big 6/4 board, and then rough cutting that to size and go through the milling process and all that fun. And then we'll start on the drink rail. All right, here we go. So a handful of things have been going on here. I've got the little drink rail finished up for the back edge of the table. It's been glued together, sanded. It's sanded up to 120 currently. I'm going to move this out of the way now. I've also got all of the painted parts sanded and prepped for paint, except for I have to add some masking tape to the areas where there's going to be joints connecting them. I gotta do that yet, but other than that, those are ready for paint and are behind the camera. What I need to move on to now is actually cutting the top to final size. And so, and then for that, I'm gonna get that prepped for stain. Start staining that, and then comes finishing. And so I have a whole bunch of sample boards here that I need to sand, just like I would for the finished piece. Go through my standard sanding process, put some blue painter's tape on it, give it some numbers, and start some dyeing and staining, different processes to get the desired look that the client wants, and then drop off the samples at their house for them to pick up, or to pick out, excuse me, the right combination they want. So lots going on, lots of prep for finishing, but here we go. All right, we're at the stage of finishing. All of the sanding and masking has all been completed. And so I have a lot of parts to paint, especially on the base. There's just a lot of small parts, like these little things here. And so, as you can see in the background, I've come up with a little bit of a backyard engineering thing to paint this. I got a piece of paracord ran across my garage door supports. I've got some eyelets screwed into my piece, and I've got these little plant hanging hooks that I'll use to put on this piece of paracord. I'll have all the pieces pushed off to one side, and I'll just be spraying one at a time, but once I spray them, get some paint on it, move it out of the way over here, and it'll just hang on the garage door support on the side over there, and then I'll spray the next one, and so on. I think that should work just fine. My hand will probably get quite a bit of paint on it, or at least I think it will. I might just kind of spin it and manipulate a bit when I'm painting, but that's fine. And then I'll be able to spray the side assemblies pretty easily. Just paint the bottoms, set the bottoms on some pyramids, paint the rest of it. That should be pretty straightforward. Probably the hardest piece is this big one that you see sitting on the sawhorses here. I need a way to paint this without touching it, essentially. And so that is going to be the last thing I paint per coat. And so what I can do is what I've done is I've got some 1/4 bolts just stuck inside of these Festool, the knockdown fasteners. The bolt's just stuck in there, and then I tighten the set screw on it, and so the bolt is in there, stuck in there, and that's what is resting on the sawhorses are the bolts. And so what I'm able to do is I'm able to paint half the surface when it's in this orientation, kind of pick it up without touching the freshly painted surface, and slide it around. And then I'm able to set it back down on the bolts again on the other side, and then finish painting. And then I'll just leave that there until it dries. Similar process with the rear stretcher, but I do have a rope kind of spanning across the two bolts to pick it up and carry it. So I think this should all work just fine, but we'll see. So let's get painting. Here we go. All right, getting through the finishing process here, which is always the most stressful part for me in terms of woodworking, is the finish part. Easy to screw up a project. But I've got all the table base components primed. You can see a couple of them hanging up in the corner. Still waiting on the client to finalize the final paint color for the base. So I'm moving my attention now to the tabletop and the drink rail. The stain samples I provided, we've made a selection there. And so I'm going to go through now and start with a base of, this is umber mix-all. I'm going to mix this up with distilled water, and I'm going to use my HVLP to spray this on. I've got a 1.0 tip in the gun, and usually I apply this with like a foam brush, just like I have a little thing of water and mix all in there. Just use a brush and apply it and wipe off any excess. But today I'm going to spray it. I'm already set up for spraying. I'll just do it much faster. And then the stain I'm going to be using is this General Finishes water-based gray stone. So I'm also going to be spraying this. Since it's water-based, it dries super fast, and sometimes if you apply it with like over big surfaces like a giant tabletop, when you apply it by hand, you can get a lot of just inconsistencies where it dries in certain spots quicker than others. But spraying it, you go straight from raw wood to stained wood in a very short amount of time, and then wipe off the excess, and it should all be very consistent. And that's I have a sample over here on my saw that I was doing that with yesterday to see how much time I had to, after spraying it, how much time I had before it really started to tack up. And so I feel pretty comfortable. I can do that, and I'm also going to be using some water-based extender. I have to read the instructions here to see if I can use this with stains, but I've got this extender from General Finishes as well. And so reading their websites, looks like I can add up to like 15% of this to the stain. I probably won't add that much, maybe like 5%, but we're going to use that as well to help give me a little bit more working time with that big tabletop. And then finally, the tabletop and the drink rail thing will get 2 to 3 coats of General Finishes high performance polyurethane, also water based, to protect it. So yeah, here we go. Let's get started. I'm gonna start getting some tint mixed up with some water, and we'll get spraying. Here we go. Alright, I've got 2 coats of primer and 2 coats of the Gemini Evo on all the parts, all the painted parts. Here's just a little example of what this looks like. This is the dull finish, or the dull sheen, I mean. Looks pretty good. I'm at a stage now where I want to assemble the little corner braces into my leg assemblies. I have this fear that I masked off a little bit too much and that there's going to be a small sliver of bare wood showing between the adjoining parts. And so I mentioned this before, but the reason I'm painting these not installed is that getting in the little crevice, or the little open area here, I'll hook this up. Trying to paint in this little area would have been impossible. So that's why I paint them separately, and then I'm going to assemble them. I'll put at least 1 more coat of paint on, maybe 2, depending on how it's looking. But now I'm going to assemble these. And so I did number them all with some depressed little depressed figures before I painted them and masked them. So hopefully finding out where they go should be very easy. This one says number 3. Guess I'll just take a moment here to talk a little bit about design. I did design this base with all these corner braces included in them, because I thought A, I wanted it for structural reasons, and as well B, I thought it looked interesting, gave some visual interest, but didn't really think much about the finishing process until I was like kind of well past the design phase and already had the client sign off on what it would look like. And of course, in hindsight, right, I kind of wish I didn't have all these small corner pieces in here, at least on these leg assemblies, because this issue here, I have a feeling that no matter what I do, there's going to be a visible seam between the painted surfaces. I just am not going to be able to I'm not going to be able to fill that with anything at this point, and so there's going to be a seam there, a little shadow line, and I'm just something I'm going to have to live with and learn from for next time. So as I'm wrapping up the assembly here in my shop, I thought I already know this is a really long video, but I thought I would at least share some of the lessons I learned about this piece with the folks that are actually still watching the video. First, the painting. So I found out if I'm going to paint something before assembly, there's no point in masking off the surfaces where they're going to touch adjoining pieces. There's just no point. I end up having to basically paint the ends anyway, because you kind of just make them out around the corner if the joint wasn't pulled super tight. So I ended up painting most of the ends anyway, even though I masked them off in the first time. The Evo paint I used by Gemini it seemed like a really good paint, really hard and tough, stuck well, but it's really thin. I was getting pretty frustrated with it. Probably on my end, I probably got to change some procedural stuff. Don't thin as much. Maybe use a little bit smaller or a finer tip. I was using a 2.0 tip, which seemed a little big for it. I should have maybe been using like a 1.8 or a 1.5. Anyway, we'll try it again. I'll try it again here because I think it is a good product. So I'll give it another chance and just change my process. Third thing I've learned on this project, those small diagonal braces. I made a big deal about keeping them out of the way to paint underneath them. But honestly, once it's assembled, you really can't see underneath them. So I should have just maybe hit that area quick with a brush, or with a brush really fast, and then put the brace on and did all my prep with filling joints and sanding, and then painted it all at once. It probably would have been a little bit less frustrating for me, a little bit, I shouldn't say frustrating, less time consuming, really. I'd say the next one is when I'm next time I use the knockdown fasteners, I use them in conjunction with a domino always, and when they're in line like I had them, I will not use the wide slot for the domino. It's a little bit too sloppy of a fit with that knockdown fastener. So if you're gonna put them in line with each other, use the narrow setting. And then last but not least, the top was really heavy for this table, and I actually think is too heavy. The base was super solid, but the base wasn't heavy. So when you got the top on there, it sat on carpet. It was just a little wobbly. So it's had to get attached to the wall, adjoining wall, to keep it from wobbling or toppling over or anything like that. So I need to figure out a different way to make thick looking tops that aren't as heavy. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments for me about the project or about this longer format of the video, let me know that as well. Thanks. Have a good one.